Welcome to the Relationship Revolutions podcast with Alan Watts, the love engineer. The world needs more healthy, loving, and lasting relationships, yet school does not teach how to attract, build, and keep them.
Welcome to today's episode of Relationship Revolutions. And today's episode, I have 20 questions from women they want answered about men. So some of these questions seem a little bit bizarre, but they've been asked, so they will be answered. And some, I believe, will actually add value to some of you. So let's get straight into this. Question number one. Why do men generally have smaller friend circles than women? And that's a great question. And for me, I think it goes back to the days of the hunter-gatherers and cave dwellers. And when we were out hunting, we needed to know that the guys we were hunting with, we could trust. We had to know that they had our backs. And it's very much the same today. If you think about the amount of teasing and bullying that some guys get when they're a boy in school, they tend to stick with a few close friends that are almost like brothers. They know they can trust. They know they've got the back. And on top of this, there's the way guys interact together and the way women interact together are different. Where a lot of women will say compliments and things to other women that they don't mean. And a lot of men will tease each other, banter with each other, say a lot of potentially negative stuff to each other and not mean it. And they want to know that if there's something that they do not like in those conversations, they can say, hey, mate, that's not on, and have that conversation about it safely. Question number two. Is it true when a man says we look better without makeup? For me, in most cases, and also a lot of the guys I speak to, the answer to that is yes. It's not men saying you need to go out and buy this makeup. It's the makeup companies, it's the media magazines, the movies that play on insecurities that women have about how they look. For the most part, when a man goes out on a date for the first time, or any date for that matter, he wants her to look as good in the evening as she does in the morning. And if he finds her attractive in the morning, when there's no alcohol involved or anything like that, then he finds her attractive, not just for her looks, but also who she is. And for most guys, who she is on the inside is the most important. That's one of the things that we develop as we get older. Because as young boys, a lot of it is more about physical and the caveman mindset that we still have is thousands of years old, that monkey mind, that reptilian brain that is focused predominantly on reproduction. So it looks for what would be considered to be a partner he can mate and have children with. But times have changed. Our culture, our society is very, very different now to what it was then. Even back then, there was no makeup. Yet men still found women attractive. Any criticism over a woman's looks or her makeup, for the most part, actually comes from other women, not men. So yes, when we say you look better without your makeup, we say it because that is true for us. Is that going to be true for every single man that you interact with? Not necessarily. But for the most part, when he says it, he means it. Question number three. What is the obsession with blowjobs? Well, not all guys are obsessed with blowjobs. But what is it about having a blowjob that we like? And it comes down to variety and a different sensation. Question number 4. Why do some men feel that they have to lie? This is a tough one to answer because every man feels differently, and every man that feels he has to lie does so for different reasons. For some, it goes back to childhood, where they might have had an incident where they did something wrong, and their parent says, "Oh, I just want to know what happened or who did this. You're not going to be in trouble." So they say, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it was me. I don't know why I did it. I just did." Whatever their reasoning may be at that time. And then the parent really lets rip into them and tells them off, and they can have that belief in mind from that day forward that if I tell the truth, it leads to pain. So I might as well lie to protect myself from that pain. That's one reason. Another is when they've told the truth to previous partners or parents, and they've got a lot of verbal abuse back, and they found it uncomfortable and painful to deal with. That's another reason. So that's 2. And the third one is they don't actually want to hurt your feelings at that time. They don't want to be the bad guy. Neither of these things are great. Lying isn't great. It doesn't matter who's doing the lying, whether it's a man, a woman, an adult, or a child. It's still not great. None of us want to be lied to. But sometimes telling the truth can be very difficult. Do men have selective hearing? Well, there's a big part of me that wants to say, if you're married, then yes. Is there such a thing as selective hearing? I don't know. I think we could, because we tend to be more focused on one thing a lot of the time. If our partners are talking away about something in the background and we're focused on what we're doing, it's not that we can't hear them, it's just we're not focused on it at that time. So if you're struggling to get your husband or your partner's attention when he's doing something and focused on that, wait till he's finished and then have that conversation. Maybe you will hear a little bit more. Some guys just stop listening if they feel like it's the same repeated conversation over and over again. So then the question is, how can you say the same thing in a different way? Question number 6. What do men think about during the day? All sorts of things. For me, I think about what I'm doing at the time, what I've got to do in a couple of hours' time, what I've got to do for the rest of the day. How is what I'm doing getting me closer towards my goals or the targets that I want to achieve? At the same time, I'll also think about my kids. I think about my partner. I think about my family, and also think about what I might want to do next time I get out and see my guy friends. And I think there might be a subtle underlying question with this one, say, that is asking, do men just think about sex all day? For the most part, no. Number 7, Why do men often watch porn without their partner's involvement? There's a couple of reasons for that. One is social conditioning. We grow up in this culture where we don't talk about sex. And we're also grow up in an environment a lot of the time where sexuality is shamed. Wanting sex is shamed because, especially if you're a man that wants sex, then obviously you want sex all the time and that's all you want. So why do they watch porn without their partners? Sometimes it goes back to that childhood upbringing and shame around masturbation. And sometimes a lot of men have been out with a partner or the wife. They notice a attractive woman and she doesn't like the fact that her husband or her partner has noticed another woman. That often can trigger some insecurities and thoughts about, oh, he wants her, not me, and all that kind of thing, which a lot of the time inside a man's brain at those times, they'll notice a pretty woman. At that moment, think, oh, she's pretty. Carry on with the day. And she doesn't enter his head again. However, she doesn't leave the wife's head or the partner's head. And later on that day, she might bring up this other woman and he'll be like, well, what other woman? He's forgotten that. But she hasn't. So if he's had experiences like that, to then watch porn with his wife or his partner, that could then trigger those insecurities, questions about, oh, do you find her more attractive than me? And do you want to do that kind of thing we're watching with me? Is this why we're watching it? And all sorts of questions that he doesn't necessarily want or need at that moment. He just wants to watch it, get himself off, and then get on with the next job. Number 8, what is the obsession with anal? That is a very interesting question. And for me personally, I'm not obsessed with anal, so I don't really know the answer to that one. But I think in some ways it goes back to a little bit like the obsession with a blowjob. It's a different sensation, different feeling, but also added to that is the forbidden fruit idea. When someone says you can't do something or can't have something, that for us is a challenge. So then we want to do it just because we've been told we shouldn't do it or can't do it. Number 9, is it true men have a favorite tit? What, ours or yours? For the most part, I would say no. If there was, it would probably be the one that's closest or the one I can get hold of or whatever. Obviously, talking about my partners rather than anyone else's. Number 10, what is the obsession with tits? I don't know if it's an obsession, but it's certainly that primitive mind, the monkey mind, that's thousands of years old, and going back to what that part of the mind would consider to be a woman that's good for breeding, for having babies, raising babies, and making sure the offspring are well fed. Number 11, do they have a favorite ball? For some, it will be a football. For others, it will be a rugby ball. But I'm guessing the question is relating to our own balls. I'm going to say no. Any guys watching or listening that have a different answer to that, feel free to let me know, and I can pass that on to all the other listeners. Number 12, why did chivalry stop? As with many of the things on this list, it's not a one answer fits all. I think in some cases, chivalry is very much alive, but there are a lot of men who have had negative experiences by being a gentleman and being chivalrous. You know, kind of thing. We open the door for a lady and she turns around and let's rip at us because she can open her own door and she doesn't need a man to do this and all this kind of thing. Just no sense of gratitude and the assumption that the man's trying to sleep with her because he opened a door. Same with pulling out a chair, all that kind of thing. Offering to take a coat and hang it up, whatever it is. She can do it all herself. Of course, we know she can. We're just trying to be a gentleman. And a lot of guys have got frustrated with that and just said, well, why bother? And so that's one part of it. And I think another part of it is all these wishes for equality. So if someone's serving, opening doors, pulling chairs out, things like that, that's not equal. It's chivalry. Chivalry and equality are very difficult to have in the same space. Question number 13. Why do men ghost instead of saying they don't feel like they're enough? Well, I think really the answers to these are the same reasons that some women ghost. It goes down to fear. Fear of being the bad person, fear of hurting the other person's feelings, or fearing the response to that. I'm sorry, but this relationship is over, for whatever reason it may be over for. Ultimately, it's down to fear. Question number 14. What are men looking for in a partner beyond physical attraction? This is going to be very, so for this, I've got to answer it with a kind of general perspective because every man is going to be looking for something that's slightly different. And the first thing that comes up for me is he's looking for a woman who is his opposite. He's not looking for a woman that thinks the same way as him, does exactly the same thing. If you like, she's one of the boys. Now, for me and a lot of the men I work with, we're attracted to women for one simple reason. They're not men. It's that nurturing, that inner beauty, that support. It's the peace, coming home to a place of peace after a stressful day. If you come home to having disconnect after disconnect or argument after argument and instruction after instruction of things that we need to do, it's no fun. We also look for a woman with similar values to ourselves, one that we can communicate with. And just like women want a man they feel safe with, men want a woman that they can feel safe with too. Not necessarily physically safe, not as much as women require that, but emotionally safe. If we can't be ourselves with our intimate partner, then who are we? And why are we with them? Question number 15. How do men view work-life balance and what role does it play in their overall happiness? Most men, their happiness comes from their sense of mission or purpose. We are very much doing creatures and doing things for a reason. So if our work doesn't bring us any meaning and doesn't seem like there's any purpose to it, we're not happy. If we are in a relationship where it feels like there's no purpose us being in that relationship, we're not happy. If we feel that we can't do anything to build a great relationship with a partner that we're with, we're not happy. And work and life, a lot of it, and trying to blend those two, there is very little balance in some ways, because if you've got massive goals that you're working towards, they are going to be your priority, being mission focused. If our relationship isn't part of that mission, then it doesn't necessarily come into it as much. Alison Armstrong, in her book Keys for the Kingdom, talks about the 5 stages that men go through in life. She talks about stage 2 being a knight, a little bit like Sir Lancelot, out for adventure, the next mission, the next challenge, the next girl, whatever it may be. Those guys can't commit to any kind of relationship because they're focused on the mission or the work. There is no balance there. And stage number 1 is a page. He's a young boy that sees these knights going off having adventures, whether they be lads at school or in a club or older brothers. They see them having adventures and they want the adventures too, but they're not brave enough or confident enough to go too far from mum and dad at that stage. There are 2 sides to stage 3. Stage 3 is a prince. The first kind of prince has an idea for how he wants his kingdom to be when he's older. This kind of age group could be sort of mid-20s to mid-30s. And he sets out building that kingdom. When it comes to dating or this stage, or for this kind of prince that's so focused on building that kingdom, he doesn't really have time to have a strong relationship. And being so focused on his mission, he's not really in a position to make a commitment. So he's only going to be having short relationships, or if any. When he's built his kingdom, that is when he will select his queen. The other kind of prince, he looks for a princess who he believes will become his queen. And then they work together as a team to create their kingdom. Now, the queen for the first builder has very little say in what the kingdom is like because it's already built. Whereas the other prince who's building with her as a team, she has a lot more say. Stage 4 isn't really a stage, it's more of an experience. Generally aged around mid-30s to mid-40s, and she calls it the tunnel. It's an experience or a stage where a man is questioning everything. He questions his career, he questions his purpose, he questions what he's doing with his life, what he wants, how he wants his life to be, and reflects on the times the prince and the knight. Sometimes he may behave like a knight in that phase as well. And this stage of life, often it gets mixed up with and labeled as a midlife crisis, where it just happens that he's going through this experience of life. At the same time, He's in a financial position to buy all the toys and things he wanted to buy when he was a knight, but couldn't afford. So he goes out and buys them anyway. After that tunnel, once he's got clarity on who he is as a man, how he wants to show up in life, whether it's in business or his personal life, in his relationships, as a parent, everything, he's got that clarity. He goes on to become a king. And the kings don't waste the time. They will only do the stuff that they are interested in. Occasionally, some kings will then go on to become an elder. And one of the differences between an elder and a king is that the king will pass his wisdom or his advice to anyone he believes that needs it, whereas the elder will pass that wisdom on to those who ask it. So if you haven't read Keys to the Kingdom by Alison Armstrong and you're looking for a better understanding of men, I would highly recommend it, along with the follow-on book, which is called The Queen's Code. 16. Why is it challenging for some men to express their emotions openly? Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. One of the biggest is childhood conditioning. From a very early age, a lot of us have been taught, boys don't cry, man up, just ignore your emotions and crack on with whatever job you're doing and whatever the task is. And we suppress them. We are conditioned to suppress our feelings. So when we are invited to express them emotionally or openly, it's a lot harder for us to connect with them initially because we spend a lot of time disconnected from them and just being focused on what we're doing, stuck in our heads. And as part of that also is the fear of criticism, shame, and judgment just for feeling something that we've had a lot of over the years. We might express a feeling to a girlfriend when we're teenagers or in our early 20s, and we get told how we shouldn't feel like that. Where it's just a feeling. A man's feelings should be just as valid as a woman's. But how we process these feelings to women, or the feelings we have inside of us, how we process them as men is very different to how women process their emotions. Do we talk about our feelings? Yes. There is one caveat I would say with us talking about expressing our emotions, especially if it's with an intimate partner. And the way I talk about it with my clients is that with women, if they don't feel physically safe, they do not want to share their body with that man. And a man who doesn't feel emotionally safe with a woman isn't going to share his emotions with her. When and how do we talk about our emotions? A lot of the time it'll be with our guy friends, with other men, when we're doing something, whether it's going out for a hike, cycle ride, taking a car to bits, we're normally doing something and we will talk at the same time. So if you're looking to get your man to open up more and express himself, I would say learn to understand men better and how we process our emotions, because inviting us to express them in the way that women do has a few effects. One, our testosterone levels goes down. Two, sometimes women lose attraction for men for that reason. And also our estrogen level goes up and we start to become more feminine, which for some guys wouldn't be a bad thing. But if you've got a man that's already fairly well evenly balanced between masculine and feminine, his testosterone or his masculine energy goes down, his estrogen and feminine energy goes up, he becomes less attractive. Although guys who are in that place of the energy polarity balance generally open up fairly well anyway. It's more the guys that are higher masculine that don't open up so much. Question number 17. Why do men struggle with commitment? It depends on the man. It depends on the stage of life, as I've already mentioned with the Alison Armstrong's 5 stages of life. What stage he's at is going to affect whether he can or can't commit. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's past traumas. And a lot of men pick up a lot of criticism for not being committed and things like that, where also there's a lot of women that don't commit as well. And a lot of the time it's for the same reasons. Ultimately, it comes down to fear. Fear of losing love or fear of not being good enough. Question number 18. When you answer nothing to the question of what are you thinking, are you really thinking nothing? That's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. I think the question is, really, can us men sit there looking like we're thinking, but actually be thinking nothing? And the answer is yes. One of the reasons is because men's brains and women's brains are different. It's not about right or wrong, whether it's a brain or programming system, call it what you will. They are different. It's not one better than the other. It's just different. It's a little bit like having an Android and an Apple smartphone. If you have an Apple, an iPhone, you try and operate that with Android instructions, you're going to struggle. So if you look at a man's brain as being a little bit like a waffle, in that everything's compartmentalized, everything's square, everything's even. If you pour some maple syrup into one area, it's not going to spill over into the others. And a woman's brain is a lot more like spaghetti. Everything is tied up, everything is connected to everything else, and you can't just pick up one bit. You can't pick up one area, everything comes with it. So we will have inside our heads, it'll be a little bit like a filing cabinet. Everything will be in alphabetical order, and you'll have a box for the work, box for play, box for music, box for fun, box for sports, and a box for our partners, and a box for nothing. It's a little bit like being in a meditative state, being in the nothing box. We're just there. Our body is here, our mind is somewhere, but not actually thinking about anything. For us, being in that box is peace. And sometimes when we're in that box, we're not paying attention to anything else other than that box. And if our partner's trying to have a conversation with us at that time, then we get accused of having selective listening. Question number 19. Why do some men find independent women intimidating? Well, that's a great question. And if a client had asked me that in a one-on-one session, I would then ask her if men have actually told her that she's intimidating, or if it's her interpretation of how those men are showing up. A lot of it depends, again, on the man and the stage of his life. The king will never be intimidated by an independent woman. Neither will the elder. The guy in the tunnel, stage 4, he's busy questioning himself, so he's not particularly intimidated. And I think the big part of this conversation really comes back down to the masculine and the feminine energies, where a lot of independent women, whether consciously or unconsciously, are showing up in their masculine energy. They're doing everything that men can do, and there's nothing wrong with that. The challenge is, with these energies, opposites attract. A bit like the north and south poles of a magnet, the opposites attract. The like poles push each other away. So a woman that's showing up as if she's a man, but not saying I identify as a man or any of that kind of stuff, that's a completely different conversation. It's just energetically more masculine. If he's in his masculine as well, those opposite energies are not going to attract. So it could be, and it is in quite a lot of cases, where the men are not intimidated by independent women. They're just not attracted to them. Do some men, generally the younger ones or the ones who haven't done a lot of inner work, feel intimidated by independent women? Yes, they can. And there's a big difference between someone feeling intimidated and the other person being intentionally intimidating. There are two very different things. And another thing that comes up in this area is social conditioning. Yes, we've been now in a world where all things should be equal. There's still a lot of conditioning around the man needs to be the provider. If you don't want the man to be a provider, that's cool. But that's where a lot of guys are. And also going back to what I mentioned earlier about purpose. If that independent woman has everything sorted pretty much, and that man can't see any purpose for being in her life, then he's not going to be attracted to her. Because why is he there? Number 20. The last question of all is, why is body count important to men? Well, that depends on the man. And I see a lot of podcasts coming out from the States talking about this and saying it's because men are attracted to youth and beauty and virgins and all that kind of thing, or at least low body counts. And there is truth in that, yes. But as I mentioned in the conversation I had with Anthony Asprey, for myself, I want a woman who knows what she wants, knows what she enjoys, knows where her boundaries are. That way we can have that conversation and I know I'm not crossing those boundaries. If I'm her first sexual partner, I have to learn the hard way. And that's always not a pleasurable experience for either of us. And I think one of the biggest mistakes with this conversation around body count is we're looking at the number of bodies, but we don't take into account the rejection count or the rejection score, for a better term possibly. And what that means is, if you've got a guy that fits the socially attractive thing in looks, financial status, attitude, personality, and all of these things, he's going to be turning women down, or he has the opportunity to turn women down. So if he's not rejecting anyone, he's going to have a high body count as his female counterpart. If she's not rejecting anyone, then she is going to have a high body count and a low rejection count because they're not rejecting anyone. Now, you can have someone like that that's, say they reject almost everyone because they have that small description or ideal partner that they seek, and they're rejecting anyone who doesn't fit that. They are going to be a lot more loyal in a relationship. To the flip side of that, someone who's doesn't have the looks, the financial status, the personality, and basically takes whatever they can get. If they've only had 2 or 3 offers of people sleeping with them and they take every single one, you could say that they have a higher body count than the others. So you need to look at both sides of this. Ultimately, what men want is loyalty. And if there's a high body count, they will question how loyal she will be. Is that a good thing? I don't know. But that is part of it. So hopefully you found these answers useful. Maybe some of them entertaining. And also, for the guys listening to this, I would like to do the reverse of it and have the questions that men have always wanted to ask women and not had the answer to. So if you'd like to drop me a line or an email to relationship-revolutions@theloveengineer.rocks, then I'll include your questions in the next one, whenever that may be.
Thank you for listening to the Relationship Revolutions podcast with Alan Watts, the Love Engineer. If you found this episode useful, please like, subscribe, and share.